Tell us real paranormal stories from your lives.
I don't know if this is considered paranormal. I guess so. 3 a.m., it was about 2 to 3 years ago. I woke up and sat up in bed. It was very dark. It took me a while to get used to it. When my vision adjusted, I saw my mother in the doorway. She was looking out of the doorway, but something was wrong with her. Her hair was too disheveled, she was smiling strangely, and her facial features were a little distorted, as if it were a different person. But I still thought it was her. Then I went into a stupor, moved closer to the wall, and stupidly looked at her. She slowly hid her head behind the doorway, and that's it. It felt like she was standing there. Since there were no sounds, I would have heard that she went back to sleep. Even the floors did not creak. I was scared and lay down under the blanket, covering myself with my head. Later, I heard her snoring. In the morning, she said that she did not get up. At that time, I was sure that it was her, but now I think differently. The story from my friend. 2 a.m. Went to get a drink of water, poured some water into a glass, and went into the room. Suddenly saw a dark, elongated silhouette standing at the entrance to the room. Ran to my parents' the room, sat in the corner, and saw how these silhouettes, there were more of them, began to crawl towards me. I closed my eyes, ears, and rested my head on my knees. Suddenly, my legs began to move away from my head. I felt like I was being choked. I tried to scream, but I couldn't. Passed out. Woke up in the arms of my crying mother. I didn't understand what was happening. Later, I asked my mother what had happened. Now, from my mother's words, I heard footsteps in the hallway. I realized that you, my friend, couldn't fall asleep as usual and were either going for water or to the toilet. I started to fall asleep when suddenly I heard you run into the room and almost bang your head on the floor. You choke, try to say something, but it doesn't work. Later they went to a doctor, psychiatrist, but the doctor just threw up his hands. My friend and I think that either it was a panic attack but still, the real reason has not been revealed. October 2020, somewhere in the middle, time around 21:30. My mother and I were on the balcony watching the nightlife, and then suddenly there was a feeling as if everything was happening in a dream. Out of nowhere, a white gazelle appeared. The windows were curtained. You could see crosses there. It was not a funeral gazelle, so to speak. It rushed along the asphalt at a crazy speed, faster than any other gazelle, and then turned towards the trees. It should have crashed into these trees 100%, but it never left. As soon as the gazelle reached these trees, it disappeared. This feeling like in a dream disappeared. There were no people on the street, 1 to 2 people. Mother saw the same thing. We don't smoke, don't drink, don't use anything. What it was is still unclear. Others, my mother saw a poltergeist at home, a hooded figure that flew around the apartment without legs. My mother doesn't have schizophrenia, by the way. We've seen dark creatures all the time. The rest saw ghosts. This is my time. I am telling everyone I can. So, when I was about 6 years old, my mother and I lived in an apartment on the outskirts of the city. Everything was fine until her friend and her cat moved in with us for a while. That's how it all started. We had an ordinary one-room apartment. There was a large bed in the room, adjacent to the wall, which separated the living room and the kitchen. This bed was so large that part of it went over the wall, and if you lay your head on this part, you could stare at the bathroom and toilet doors. I hope you understand how it is. One night, when my mother was at work, this aunt and I were sleeping, or rather, she was sleeping and I was falling asleep. But my sleep suddenly evaporated the moment I saw the bathroom door open, the light turn on, a few seconds pass, the light turns off, and the door closes. The next incident was told to me by my mother. I could write it all off to my childish imagination, but the fact that my mother was a witness to the paranormal makes me doubt it. She and her friend were sitting in the kitchen. My mother heard something fall in the living room. It turned out to be a flower pot standing on the windowsill. It was about 3 to 4 years ago, when my parents, my brother, and I went to visit my mother's friend. She has a daughter, my ex-best friend, who was with us at the time when all this was happening. Anyway, we decided to go to my house and swim in the pool. It was 2 a.m., and it was quite a long way from her house to mine, so we decided to go through the center where there was good lighting. Walking along the sidewalk on the main street, we noticed some silhouette behind a tree. For some reason, there was no streetlight in that particular place, and decided to wait for my brother, who was on a bike. He rides up to us, and we tell him about this guy. My brother decides to go up to him, holds out his hand, and asks if he needs help. The guy says no in a very hoarse voice, and I notice that his whole hand and face are covered in blood. And if you look closely at his face, you can see how he smiles. Very creepy. We decide to go further, and my brother says that he noticed a knife in his hand. So we went faster, and literally on the next block, we see another dude behind a pole. When we passed, he turned on the phone screen, but it was noticeable that he was watching us. When we got home, we decided to take some sweets and swim in the pool in the yard. About half an hour passed, and we heard the door to the house slam. We didn't close it on purpose because it was hot. At first, we thought that our parents had returned home, but when we called them, it turned out that they were still visiting. So my brother decided to take a crowbar, and my friend and I took sticks and went into the house. We started to beat all the curtains, and on one of them, a silhouette was clearly visible. My brother hid it, but there was no one there. Then we heard a knock on the window. To say that we had a fight would be an understatement. We decided to look behind the curtain to see who was there, but there was no one there. We ran out into the street in shock. It seemed like there was no one, and then again we noticed some silhouette next to the front door. There was a small long hole in our gate, and it was in it that we noticed a face looking at us. We immediately ran home, closed all the doors, and called our parents. They were drunk and did not believe us, and then they said that they would come soon and that we should not go out. Well, we were stupid and out of fear, decided to go out into the yard. There was no one else in that hole. We were standing there watching, and then suddenly a face with its tongue hanging out appeared. And at that moment, I was shining a flashlight on that hole, and we saw that it was not a person's face, but some kind of creature with a distorted mug, all covered in blood. We had another fight and ran home without going outside again. And about 2 hours later, we managed to fall asleep because our parents had already returned. They said that they hadn't seen anyone and there was no blood near the gate or the door. I still don't know what it was. My parents don't believe me, so only my brother, ex-girlfriend, and I know about this story. It was about 5 years ago, but it still scares me. I'm telling it from my sister's perspective. I lived with my mom, sister, and 2 nieces. That day, my cousins also arrived. The day went great. It was time for bed. Everyone fell asleep. Only me and my cousin were awake. Everyone else was sleeping on the couch. It was exactly 03, and the first niece woke up. She stared at one point for about 5 minutes and started crying. We calmed her down. We thought she had a scary dream. Then the second niece got up and also stared at that point, but immediately started crying. It scared us. But then everyone who was sleeping also got up and stared at that fucking point and cried. It was creepy. It happened 2 to 3 years ago. My mom likes to sleep in the kitchen. She gets very tired during the day. We have a gas stove. Mom put the kettle on the stove. Everyone was sleeping at the time. The kettle heats up. Mom falls asleep. And somehow the fire goes out and the gas just starts blaring. Then I quote her words. I'm sleeping. You come up to me, wake me up and say, Lena, turn off the gas. And you say it in my mom's voice. She died 2 years before I was born. Everything was like in a fog. I turned off the gas. The kettle was red. The apartment smelled terribly of gas. Dad felt bad and woke up. Because of this, I went to your room, and you're still sleeping. By the way, I don't remember this at all. When I was 7 years old, I was left alone at home. My mother was at work. My grandmother was busy at home, so I was left alone. It was 2017, 2019. So I sat in the kitchen all day, scrolling through eyes, like... After some time, I heard someone trying to put the key to the door into the keyhole. I thought it was my mother who came back early, but the sound stopped. I felt uneasy. I looked through the peephole. It was empty, and I went into the hall. I forgot to say that the kitchen was right next to the front door. While I was in the hall, I heard someone pulling the handle. Then I got very scared and went again to check who it was. Looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. I returned to the hall again. The sound did not stop. Then I was already completely scared and called my mother. She said that she would be back soon. The sounds continued. I went to look again, but as soon as I got up, the sounds stopped. I looked through the peephole again and again. There was no one there. I thought that maybe there was someone small there, and I opened the door, and there was no one there. Again, I went back into the hall. Someone started to push the keys in, but this time it was my mother. I still don't know what or who was hitting, but then I knew I was scared.